Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all again. Thanks, Miriam. My name is Sinclair. I am a graduate student at UT Austin, and yes, tonight I am going to be your moderator. So first off, I'm super excited to introduce Moiya McTier, who's going to tell us all about science communication and what skills we can develop to be effective science communicators. Just really quickly, if there are any questions during the talk, please write them in the chat, and Moiya will be checking that throughout her talk. And then at the end, if there are more questions, you can either continue using the chat or you can use the raise hand function. And if you do that, I will use it to call on you and unmute you so you can ask your questions out loud. But so just a real quick introduction for Moiya, not that she really needs it, because I think we all know her pretty well by now. But Moiya is a graduate student at Columbia University in New York City, where she studies galactic habitability. She's become an expert in world building, which she explores and discusses on her podcast, Exolore. She is clearly an excellent person to hear from if you're interested in science communication, considering the multitude of talks she's given over the years and the huge following she's acquired on social media with nearly 11,000 Twitter followers, which is crazy to think about. So I'll turn it over to Moiya now and let her take it from here. So thank you, Moiya.
Oh, thank you, Sinclair. Perfect. All right. I would really appreciate it if you're comfortable, if you could show your video. One of the tips I will give you as a science communicator is that it's good to play off of your audience, to look at their facial expressions, to see if they're understanding what you're saying. Because if you see someone go like, well, that's a sign that they didn't understand what you just said. So you should reword it or go back and explain it a little bit more. So having people's faces to react to is really important in scicomm. My next tip that I'm going to give you is don't let your phone hang out of your pocket when you're on stage giving a talk. That makes you look unprofessional, and then you can't use those pictures afterwards. And one of the things that you should get from every scicomm event is a photo so that you have documentation that you actually did it. Okay. Yeah, throughout, if you have any questions, put them in the chat and I'll try to address them as they come up. And if I don't get to any, we can use them for the Q&A session at the end. First, I want to start by telling you a little bit about my scicomm journey. I discovered science communication the same year I discovered astronomy in 2014. I was at NRAO, it was during my NAC internship, and I randomly in the hall ran into someone who works in the education and public outreach office, and I thought her job was super cool. So I decided that I wanted to start doing speaking events, speaking engagements when I got back to campus in the fall. In 2015, I realized that I want to continue on with astronomy. I realized I wanted to continue on with science communication, but I was a student. I didn't have much time to spare. So most of my speaking engagements were poster presentations and conference talks, including the talk that I gave at the NAC conference that year. I graduated from college in 2016. I didn't take any time off before going to grad school. For some people, that's the right choice. For me, it was the right choice. For you, maybe it isn't. It's totally up to you. I started doing talks immediately once I got to New York. I moved to New York on August 12th, and I gave my first talk at Astronomy on Tap on August 18th. So I started right away. And from there, from Astro on Tap, I moved on to doing Columbia outreach events. If you haven't heard of Astronomy on Tap, it's this really cool organization series, but there are different Astronomy on Tap hubs in different cities. So I know they have one in Austin. They have them all over the world, actually. There are even some in Scotland. So Astronomy on Tap is a great starting point if you want to get into science communication as an astronomer. In 2017, I started doing talks at informal venues and museums, things like the Museum of Science in Boston, what's it called? The big boat. Why am I blanking on this? Like it's an aircraft carrier in the Intrepid. That's what it is. The Intrepid Museum in New York. I still had plans to stay in academia after I graduated, but over the year of 2017, it slowly shifted to me wanting to do science communication full time after I graduated. So that realization hit at the beginning of 2018. And so I really started ramping up my my science communication. I gave talks, I did media appearances on different TV shows, at different events and conferences. I made an actual strategic plan to grow my science communication platform. I started what I called my year of yes, which is a year from September of 2018 to September of 2019, where I said yes to any professional scicomm opportunity that came my way. I'm a huge proponent, I'm a huge fan of this year of yes strategy. It helps combat imposter phenomenon, because when you get an invitation during your year of yes, no matter what your imposter thoughts tell you, you have to agree to do it. You have to accept that invitation. So you can't let your imposter thoughts get in the way. It also really expanded my network and got me out of my comfort zone. So I did things like a stand-up comedy routine during my year of yes, which was never something I thought I would do. So I highly encourage you to do something like that. In 2018, I actually started getting invitations to speak. So instead of reaching out to other people, asking them if I could talk at their event, it flipped, but that was after 5 years of putting in the work. And I started producing my own content. So I started producing podcasts. I started putting together a live show in New York City. And in 2020, this year, after 6 years of hard work, everything started to pay off. I was invited to join a podcast network with my show Exolore. I got a book deal. I'm developing a TV show. I've been consulting with a bunch of different organizations, including Disney. And I've been getting a lot of invitations to speak. So that's my journey. I have a lot of experience. I'm not saying that to brag, although it feels nice. But I'm saying that because if you have questions about scicomm, chances are high that I have experience in what you are interested in. So if you have questions about anything, even if I don't mention it explicitly in this talk, you can still ask me. And if I haven't done it, then I know someone who has, and I'm happy to connect you. Even if you don't want a career in scicomm, which I understand is probably most people, these skills are valuable for you. So as academics, if you choose to stay within academia, either as a professor or a research scientist somewhere, we're required to communicate. Academics communicate all the time. Whether you're teaching, giving talks, there are lots of different talks that academics have to give, outreach talks, talks at journal clubs, job talks when they're applying for postdocs or faculty positions. You're asked to communicate when you write proposals and papers or review articles. And you're asked to communicate when you advise and mentor students. One day you will get to that point. How many of you have ever been in a meeting with your advisor or your mentor and they say something about the research and you just don't understand because they're not that great at communicating? Go away. Exactly, yeah, thanks. So if that's happened to you, then that wouldn't have happened if your mentors or advisors took more time to practice their communication skills. If you don't want to stay in academia and you decide to go into industry, which is the super broad umbrella term, even if you do that, you're expected to know how to communicate. In fact, communication is the #1 skill that companies say they're looking for in their employees. Those communication skills, these things that are usually considered soft skills, like being able to communicate complex ideas, being able to listen when people actually talk to you, being able to empathize with other people in the room. Those skills, plus your degree, will make you a super compelling applicant. People talk about how astrophysics degrees are some of the most hireable degrees in the world. Well, it packs a bigger punch if you have the soft skills to go along with it. Okay. The first thing that you should do if you're interested in science communication or just developing more of your communication, your soft skills, is figure out what your mission is. So for example, my mission in science communication is to help people trust science and scientists through good storytelling. It's really important to know what your mission is because it will help you determine what your audience should be. There are lots of different types of audiences. You can talk to kids, you can talk to high school students who I still think are children, but they demand to be separated into a different category, or adults, and that can be science-minded adults, it can be drunk adults in a bar. So there are lots of different types of audiences. Knowing your mission will also help you figure out what your scicomm style is or your tone. So do you want to be really serious? Do you want to be funny and quirky like Bill Nye? Do you want to be inspirational like Carl Sagan? Figuring out what your vibe is as a communicator is a really important step. Knowing your mission can also help you figure out your medium. So do you want to start a blog? Do you want to start a YouTube channel? Do you mostly want to do science communication or any type of communication over social media like Twitter? You have to answer all of these questions if you want to be effective in your scicomm or communication journey. So now I'd like everyone to take time to really think about what your mission as a communicator is. Maybe some of you haven't thought about that before, and that's totally fine. I'm not going to ask you to do that in like 30 seconds. But if you have given some thought, or if you know off the bat what you think you want your mission to be, write it down. And if you're comfortable, share it in the chat so we can keep each other accountable, so we can help each other achieve our missions. And your mission doesn't have to be something big. Your mission can be, like teaching your grandma what a galaxy is. Like that's a mission, that's valid. So whatever you want to do with your communication, write that down so that you can commit to it. I'm gonna give you another minute to put that in the chat if you're comfortable. Lindell says that her mission is to describe the NAC program to potential partners and students. That's a great mission. Yeah, and knowing that helps you, even within that defines an audience, right? Potential partners. There are lots of different types of people who can partner with the NAC. Lindell would know it better than I do. But yeah, that's a great mission. Thanks for sharing, Lindell. All right, become better at communicating my research to strangers. Oh yeah, that's a big one. People here were astrophysicists and they immediately have thoughts. Either they want to know everything, or they want you to know that they think the moon landing is a hoax. So people have feelings about our work, absolutely. All right, so now that you, Sam says, show women that STEM fields are a viable option too. Yes. Absolutely, it's true. And by becoming a science communicator, you can be a model, a role model for women who maybe don't know that this is a field for them. Okay, so once you have your mission, you can actually start doing the scicomm. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about scicomm in 3 different media. So I'll talk about scicomm through social media, scicomm through writing, and scicomm through speaking. And then I'll give a few just general tips for science communication. First, scicomm with social media. Oh, I love Betty White. So one thing, even if you don't want to be a science communicator, but you want to stay in academia and be a quote unquote successful academic, that probably includes writing papers. And studies have shown, this link will take you to an article that describes this, but studies have shown that articles or papers that get tweeted more also get cited more. And this is compared to articles that get tweeted less. This isn't even taking into account articles that don't get tweeted at all. So even if you want to be a successful academic and have your papers read by a lot of people and cited by a lot of people, then a social media presence is actually pretty important. If you want to grow your following, you have to have a strategic plan. I didn't get to 11,000 followers by just willy-nilly posting whenever I wanted or posting any type of content. I had a plan that I followed. I don't know what that is. That's the link, actually, I do know what that is. So my strategic plan for growing your social media following is a 5-step plan. So one way that people do this is asking people to follow or retweet them, asking someone with a larger following to follow you. Stop. I'm trying this strategy of using my iPad and sharing the screen from there for the first time, so I'm sorry if there are any bugs. But this is one strategy that you can do, and I hate that strategy. It feels shady and slimy and gross to actually ask other people to share your stuff or retweet you. I hate when people do that. It makes me really uncomfortable. Can you tell? I just don't do it. There are other things that you can do to organically grow your following. So have a steady stream of content. You can make that daily or weekly. Monthly probably isn't going to do anything, but post regularly, because that will actually make your tweets appear closer to the top of the algorithm. Different social media platforms use different algorithms to determine what goes at the top. This link, the Have a Strategic Plan link, takes you to an article that talks about the different social media platforms and what strategies might be best for those. But have a steady stream of content works across all platforms. Include calls to action in your posts. I'm mostly thinking about Twitter, but this applies to other social media too. So include calls to action. So tell them, do this, or like this tweet. No, that's a bad example. Have a poll in your tweet, for example. I recently posted something that was totally ridiculous. I had a poll, what's your favorite non-dairy milk? And within like an hour, it had more than 1,000 votes on it. And so tweets that ask people to actually engage with the tweet get more attention, because once someone engages with it, then their followers see that they've engaged, and it just gets you a lot more eyeballs on the post. Use relevant hashtags. Don't overload on hashtags, and be aware of what the hashtag etiquette is for your social media platform of choice. For example, hashtags, like it's more appropriate to add a bunch of hashtags to an Instagram post than it is to add them to a tweet. So just know what the etiquette is there. But using relevant hashtags is a good way of making sure that other people who don't follow you but are interested in this type of content will find you. Engage with other people's content. You're not going to grow your following if you just tweet or post on your own without ever interacting with other people. It's social media. Socializing is part of the game, so you have to actually interact with others. So retweet their stuff. Often I'll see that someone retweeted one of my tweets, and I'll go to their profile and I'll be like, oh, this person seems interesting, let me follow them. So if you retweet someone else's stuff, or if you reply to one of their tweets, I'm sorry for all the Twitter-centric language, but just like translate it to your social media platform of choice. They will see that you did that. They'll go to your profile, maybe they'll follow you. But engaging with other people's content makes it more likely that you'll get more followers. And post at high traffic times. Different platforms have different high traffic times, and with COVID, those times are shifting. It used to be that, like on Twitter, the best times to tweet were like 9 a.m., maybe like between noon and 1, and then again at like 6. Now I'm finding that my tweets at like 10:15 p.m. get the most traction and get the most engagement. So do experiments. We're scientists, we can run our experiments. Post things at different times and see when your followers are most likely to engage with your content. Also, use character limits as scicomm practice. A lot of people see character limits as a negative, but you can use it as a strength. Being able to describe your research really succinctly is a science communication skill, and there's no place that's better to practice that than Twitter, because you're really constrained to a small number of characters. So after this, or right now, if you want to put it in the chat, actually, and then people can provide feedback, but take some time, not right now, to think about how you would describe your research in a tweet. So describe your research in 280 characters. You can use emojis if you want, but make sure it's concise and it's clear. And if you were a stranger reading that tweet, you would know about the project, or you would know about the research. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about scicomm through writing, which is relevant to being able to tweet your research, because Twitter is very short form writing. Writing takes so many forms. You can write on Twitter, you can write on blogs, you can start writing on your school paper. That's a really great place to get introduced to science writing. News articles, journalism, which is separate from news articles. Journalism is typically a lot more involved. It's a lot more story-oriented. You can write books, you can write on TV shows, you can do research for news channels. There are so many different ways to do science writing. So if you're interested in science writing, know that you have a lot of options. My tips for science writing are to know your audience. This is why knowing your mission is really important, because you know what your target audience is. You're not going to write, what's that kids magazine that's in all the doctors' waiting rooms, Highlights? You're not going to write an article in Highlights the same way you would write an article in National Geographic. So know who your audience is so you can figure out what type of language to use. And then second, I think this is more important. You have to catch your audience's attention in the first sentence. Attention spans are much shorter these days than they used to be. Maybe in the past you got a whole paragraph to show that your story was worth reading, and now you really only get a sentence. And this is why that tweet your research exercise is actually really useful, because finding a punchy, sticky, memorable opening sentence is how you become successful as a science writer. If you want to make money from science writing, which is possible. It's really hard to make a career out of science writing, but it's actually not that difficult to make a little bit of pocket change from science writing. But to do that, start small, work for your school newspaper, maybe write for Astrobites. Everyone here is qualified to write for Astrobites. So you can do that, and then you can move up to writing a blog or actually pitching stories to different magazines and online sites. This link will take you to an article or a list of resources from the Science Writers of America, the Association of Science Writers or something. But it's a list of resources for how to actually put together a pitch for a piece of science writing. And I think it also includes a list of places that pay for articles, which is really important because not every magazine does. And then if you do that, you're a boss. It's awesome. Okay. On to scicomm through speaking. A lot of the skills that you gain through writing also apply to speaking. So some of my tips will be the same. But there are so many different places to talk. Just like there are a lot of places to write, speaking is even, I think, more common, and there are even more opportunities. So you can talk to kids at their schools. You can talk to families at museums. You can talk to amateur astronomy clubs, which are usually like 60-year-old dudes and they're like grandkids who are super into science. You can talk on other people's shows or streams or podcasts, and this is especially common these days. So many people started YouTube channels or live stream shows or podcasts once COVID hit. So there are a lot more opportunities to be a guest on people's shows right now because they're just growing. And so growing podcasts or shows that don't have a huge following are more willing to accept unknown guests than more established shows. Being a guest on other people's shows helps you become a better host. So if you eventually want to start producing your own content, make your own YouTube show or your own podcast or whatever, then it's great practice if you first start as a guest on other people's shows. I'll also say that this step was really important for me when I first started hosting my podcast. I was really nervous about, no, the other way around. I used to reach out to podcast hosts to ask if I could be a guest on their show, and I was really nervous. I thought I was bothering them or wasting their time. But now that I'm a host of my own show, I love when people reach out to me and ask if they can be on my show, as long as they're not, like ridiculous people. But when a legit person emails me and asks if they can be on my show, it takes work off of my plate. It means that I don't have to do as much research to find guests. So you are doing people a favor by reaching out to them, especially if you are careful about it. Careful is not the right word, but if you reach out to them with an actual plan about what you could talk about on their show and it's relevant to their show's content, right? So don't be afraid to reach out to people and ask to be a guest on their stuff. When you're speaking, it's important to find a prep routine that works for you. So one piece of advice that people often give for speaking is to practice, practice, practice. And I hate that advice. I hate it so much because not everyone practices. It makes some people uncomfortable, and not practicing makes other people uncomfortable. So find whatever prep routine works for you. Also, find whatever pre-talk routine works for you. So before I give talks, I usually like to spend some time alone and collect my thoughts and figure out what I'm going to say. I know what I'm going to say ahead of time, but like remember what I'm going to say. So find whatever that routine is for you. And when I say don't practice if it makes you uncomfortable, I don't mean wing it. I mean, I don't practice speaking. I don't practice like talking out loud when I am about to give talks, but I do spend a lot of time putting the presentation together, and that's my version of preparing. So I'm not saying wing it, and I'm also not saying that you shouldn't practice talking, because verbal tics and distracting gestures are real, and nervous sweats are real. And so you have to practice talking to be a good speaker, but you don't necessarily have to practice individual talks the way that people traditionally tell you you should. So my tips for speaking are, again, to know your audience. You're not going to talk to kids the same way you talk to adults, and you're not going to talk to sober adults the same way you talk to drunk adults, right? So know who your audience is to figure out how you should talk to them. Don't be afraid of using jargon. Some people say you shouldn't use any in your outreach talks. I don't agree with that. I think avoiding jargon at all costs actually is a way of talking down to your audience and belittling them. Have faith in your audience. They're smarter than you think they are. Otherwise, they wouldn't have shown up to your talk. So feel free to use jargon, but always define it, because then you can turn it into a teaching moment. And that's what your entire talk should be. It should be one big hour-long or 30-minute long or whatever teaching moment.
Do you know why we're here today?
Because we're talking about science.
Yes, we're going to talk about science, and we're going to talk about...
Stop. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. So this video, I think I have time for it. It's showing a neuroscientist describing his research or explaining his research to 3 different types of people. It's a few minutes long, so I will, if I see people getting tired of it, I'll stop.
Do you know why we're here today?
Because we're talking about science.
Yes, we're going to talk about science, and we're going to talk about a very specific kind of science about people who study brains. Do you know what a brain is? What is it?
Something that helps you remember things.
Definitely. So what we're going to talk about is something that people study in the brain called the connectome.
Oh.
Do you know that your body is made up of really tiny things called cells?
Yes, I know that.
Okay, well, there's more cells in your brain, like way more cells than all the stars we can see. And so what the connectome is we'd like to know where every cell in your brain is and how it talks to every other cell in your brain. That was awesome, Daniel. Thank you.
Connectome?
Connectome.
To be honest, I have no idea.
That's good. That's a great place to start. There are cells in your brain. Those brain cells are connected by wires to each other. Electricity travels down those wires and communicates from one part of the brain to the other part of the brain. And each of those brain cells makes, 1,000 connections, something like 100 trillion connections in one brain, in your brain. Could I take all of that information and put it inside a computer? Would that computer then be you?
Computers, they don't have feelings. They won't have feelings. And I think that's one thing that makes the human race strong.
I would say that map also has your feelings in it. Because here's why. Your feelings, most neuroscientists think, come from your brain anyway. And amazingly, whether when you feel happy or sad or angry or scared, that's just brain cells communicating with each other. So I think today we're going to talk about a connectome. Have you ever heard of that?
A connectome?
Yeah.
No,
Awesome.
I don't
Good.
think so.
It's a map of all the connections between every neuron in your brain. Literally, in a human brain, something like the map of the 1 quadrillion connections that 100 billion neurons make with each other.
Is this like a map that's like an actual visual representation, like using microscopy, or
Yes.
just data? Wow, wow.
Yeah.
I'm understanding more so that it's a mapping of the circuitry, the pathways between neurons that can lead to evidence of patterns in your brain that are common between different people.
We have to use electron microscopes. And then what we have been developing are ways to slice the brain into really thin slices, use an electron microscope to take a picture of each slice, and then use computers to put it all back. Imagine that we could get the map of every connection, right? And we knew how neurons fired. Do you think we could put that in a computer, that map, and then therefore that computer should be able to think just like the brain that we extracted it from?
Well, the computer only communicates with itself in binary, so it only has 2 options. It can only ask itself yes or no questions, but a human brain has an infinity of directions that it can go.
Neurons are also digital, meaning a neuron either fires or it doesn't fire. So that's either 1 or a 0. And it's the combination of those 1s or 0s that actually produce the 10,000 different answers that you say.
All right, so what good strategies did people notice that the doctor used?
Can we say them? Can we say them?
Sure. I think we might have to unmute people individually, so it might be easier if you just put them in the chat.
It's just my thoughts so long, sorry.
That's okay. Well, you're unmuted now, so what do you think? What did you see?
I just kind of noticed that he kept using that same imagery, like when he was talking to the 5-year-old, the 12-year-old, and everybody. He kept saying, "Okay, we know what the brain is." He always kept saying connections, like you can think of them like as electrical wires, and how they fire off, information to talking to one another. So using those types of simple imageries to make connections with them, which I think that those were basic things that everybody understood universally. And then as they got older, he was able to talk to them about, he threw in some of those jargon words, and then he would quickly, like when he was talking about like the jargon word, like when he would use connectome, he would explain what exactly that is. And again, he would tie it back into those imageries.
Yeah. So using shared knowledge to form analogies, or using image words that everyone is familiar with, that's a really effective strategy. Sam's also saying changing the way he described the amount of cells. Yeah, so like you're gonna say like, this is a lot of cells if you're talking to a 5-year-old, but if you're talking to an adult, you can say, this is 5 billion cells, right? Because kids don't necessarily know what those big numbers mean. Kiana said using body language to convey concepts. Yeah, talking with your body, talking with your hands, that's super effective. Other things I noticed he did were he talked less when the person he was explaining it to was older. He gave older people more of a chance to try to put the concept in their own words before he corrected them. And that's a really effective strategy, is letting people explain something and then making note of what they get wrong, or like just gently leading them to a more accurate description or explanation. Use stories when you communicate things, not facts. Human brains are more likely to remember information when it's presented in a story, in a narrative with like characters and a beginning, a middle, an end, and like a theme and a lesson, right? We're more likely to remember that than we are to remember hard numbers and facts. Human brains are also more easily persuaded by stories than they are by facts. So if you're trying to teach someone about climate change, for example, and they're a climate denier, they don't care about your facts. They don't care how many degrees the temperature is increased. They don't care how many meters the ocean has risen. Numbers don't do anything for them, but stories about people whose lives have been affected, that might make a difference. Or stories about what could happen to them if climate change reached their region, that will do something for them. So use stories, not facts, when you're speaking and writing. Know what your time limit is and actually follow it, actually stick to it. That's the important thing. Speaking of which, I'm going to speed up a little bit so that I can reach my time. Just generally speaking, how to grow your platform, not specifically on social media, but just in general. If you want to have people know your name, then location is pretty important. Big cities have more opportunities for scicomm. Big cities have more people, so you have to have more events to keep those people entertained so they don't start setting fire to things. But you can technically do science communication anywhere, especially now with COVID, where so much stuff is happening online, and like, you don't know where I am. I could be in Montana. You don't know. So with COVID happening, scicomm is moving more online so anyone can do it, which I think is awesome. But location isn't the only thing. You have to have a strategic plan if you want to intentionally grow your platform and spread your name to other people. So step one of this plan is to have an evolving and dynamic web presence. Make yourself a website, make yourself different social media accounts, and actually use them. And every time you do a scicomm event, put evidence of it on your website. So on my website, I have a tab for speaking, and under that is a list of past events that I've done. Not all of the events, but just, you know, making sure that I put something up like every month or so. That's specifically for me because I want to do science communication, so I have to show that I'm giving a lot of talks. But if you're giving talks less frequently, if you're giving talks like once every few months, that's totally fine. Just make sure that you put evidence, like pictures, or if someone writes up an article about it, or if it was recorded and put on YouTube, make sure you put that on your website. Because then people have a record of what you've done and they can see that you're legit. So you can use that when you reach out to other people and ask to be a guest on their show. People are much more likely to let you onto their show if they have proof that you're not going to be a bumbling idiot on their show. So if you have evidence that you are an entertaining and an effective speaker, then they will let you on as their guest. Then you can start creating your own content. Once you build up a critical mass of followers, you can start to make your own shows, make your own podcasts, write your own blogs, because you have a bunch of people who are actually going to be interested in what you have to say. They've shown that already by following you. And then you can go back to being a guest on other people's shows, and you can promote your work on their shows. And then it's like you're stealing their followers, you're stealing their listeners or their viewers. And so this 4-step process is what I've used to grow my platform. Oh, I totally didn't mean for this to be a big wall of text. That's another no-no. Typically, I meant for this to appear as bullets, but it's fine. One thing that gets brought up a lot when I do these types of workshops is that people feel weird about chasing followers. And you don't have to feel bad for wanting more followers. Just don't be gross about it. Don't ask people, you know, don't say things like, oh, I'm so close to 10,000 followers, please help me get there. That just makes me really uncomfortable. You also don't have to feel, the reason you shouldn't feel bad about wanting more followers is because more followers means you have more people that you can reach for your mission. And as long as you believe in your mission, then you can, like, you can't think that it's anything but good to have more people hearing what you have to say. But if you don't want more followers, that's totally fine. It's okay if that doesn't align with what your mission is, if that doesn't align with your goal and your plan. Also, competition is dumb. One person being successful as a science communicator doesn't mean that you can't be successful. It's not pie. Or if it is pie, it's a really, really big pie, and no matter how many bites you take out of it, there's going to be enough for everyone else. So don't feel like you can't celebrate other people's wins. And then I want to make the point that having a career in scicomm or forging any type of non-traditional path, like if you are forging your own path, it's going to be hard. It takes time, you have to put in a lot of work, you have to pay your dues, but if you want it, you can totally do hard things. You can make it happen. Not all plans look alike, so from your mission, you can start to develop an action plan. You can start to put together a list of steps for how you'll get where you want to go. So here are some different examples of plans that you might have based on different missions. So if your mission, so my mission is to help people trust science. I can do that by becoming a full-time science communicator. I'm just gonna speed through these. But these are the steps that I put together to become a full-time science communicator. Grow my speaking platform, start a podcast, write a book, host a TV show, and then I become just like the go-to space person, and everyone, if they have space questions, they come to me. If your mission is to become a professor, a tenure-track professor at an R1 institution, then you have a different mission and you have a different plan to get there. So maybe you focus more on research. I have not focused on research. My research record is horrible, but that's because that wasn't my focus. So maybe you'll focus more on research in grad school, you'll do the postdoc thing, you'll get a faculty position, and then maybe you can use scicomm. My advisor did this. He created a really successful YouTube channel, and he's gonna use that in his tenure application. If you want to be a faculty member at a teaching university, maybe you can use scicomm to your advantage by using it to generate passive income. And that way, if you have a product that you have created and you've put it out into the world and people pay you to access this product, then you're making money on the side without having to think about it. And so you can use that as a cushion to focus on working a job that may not pay you as much as being a tenured professor at Columbia, like my advisor. So, whatever your mission is, whatever your plan is, do that. And if you end up deviating from your plan, that's fine. But it's important to have a plan to deviate from in the first place. There's a lot of stuff I didn't cover, like time management, how to actually create your own product and then launch it, dealing with difficult audiences. I did that a little bit with the climate denier and using stories instead of facts. I didn't tell you how you can actually remove your verbal tics or how to generate content. There's a lot of stuff I didn't cover here, so I want to make sure there's lots of time for Q&A. I see someone posted in the chat, if you're presenting to a public with different levels of understanding, is it fine to mix up the way you present about the topic, like using bigger words for experts and simpler words for children? Yeah, that's part of defining your terms. So you can use a big word and then you can define it using smaller words. Or you can even make this like a family activity for later, right? If you use big words and then during your talk, you encourage families to, you give them questions to take home and discuss as a family. I've done that before when I talk at museums where there are lots of family pairs. So yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and take your questions if you have them.
Thank you, Moiya, so much. Claps all around.
Thanks. Trying to figure out how to stop sharing my screen now without you seeing all of my embarrassing stuff on my iPad.
But yeah, I think Deborah has a question in the chat right away, and I'll keep an eye out for raised hands.
Cool. Yeah, Deborah. Do you think it's possible to incorporate the storytelling technique in field-specific conferences? I find that people in my field are horrible at giving talks. Yeah, I've noticed that too. That's why I really hate going to conferences these days. It's absolutely possible to incorporate storytelling, especially since our field, astronomy, is pretty small. So people have shared experiences. You can incorporate stories about, oh, remember that time AAS was at that weird convention center that had a legit alligator in the middle of it? Like you can use that shared experience to launch a story. And that's yeah, Short answer, yes. Also, that was a weird double AS. There were alligators. Why?
Double AS was this? I'm sorry, what?
It was 2016 in Florida, yeah.
Yeah, but that's when we found the clubhouse.
Exactly, yeah. How to show things like equations to high school students in a creative way, not bored. To that, I ask you, why do you need to show equations? Do you need to? You probably don't, because when you go into a science communication event, your goal probably isn't to make them experts in whatever you're talking about. I imagine your goal is to give them a taste and get them more excited about a topic. Unless you're like genuinely there to teach them calculus, you don't need to show equations. You can talk about things numerically and quantitatively. What I've done in the past is, instead of showing an equation on a slide, it takes a long time, but you can lead people through figuring out what an equation should be. So depending on the size of your audience, imagine you're trying to teach them about exoplanets and like what the equilibrium temperature of an exoplanet might be based on different factors. So first, what I would do is say, hey, this is what we're trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out how hot a planet might be. And then I'd ask them, what do you think we need to know? And I'd probably get crickets at first, so I'd give an example. I'd say like, well, we probably need to know how hot the star is, right? And then another person in the audience might say, oh, well, what about how far away the planet is from its star? And I'd say, yes, thank you, very brave audience member. That's exactly what we need to know. So you can lead them through figuring out what the different factors are, and then you can lead them through figuring out how those factors actually relate to each other. Like, does a hotter star mean a hotter planet? Does a closer planet mean a hotter planet? So you can lead them through that. It takes a long time, but it's worth it, because then they're more likely to remember it than if you just put an equation up on a slide. What are the pros and cons of sharing content in podcast form versus social media outlets, if any, in your experience? That's a really great question. So it just depends on what your topic is and who you want to reach. Social media is really good for short bursts of information, like sharing a meme or sharing like the headline of an article that maybe you wrote, which would be super cool. So social media is good for short stuff. Podcasts are good for things that need longer explanations that don't rely on visuals. And then a YouTube channel is good for medium to longer explanations that do require visuals. So I used to have a YouTube show for my podcast, and then I realized this is just people staring at, like, the viewers are just looking at our faces. Like, they're just watching us have this conversation. That's not that interesting. It's much more interesting as a podcast, because if you make a video, then people expect to see very interesting visual content. And if your content, if what you're saying is more interesting than what people can see, then you should put it in podcast form. Have I had issues with censorship? I haven't so far, but I'm worried that I might soon. So with a growing platform or with a growing follower count, for example, comes more responsibility. When more people are seeing your stuff, it means more people are affected by and influenced by your stuff. So you just have to, you don't have to. I want to be more careful as my platform grows. When it comes to censorship, like I think you have to set your own personal boundaries. Like if anyone ever tries to tell me that I can't talk about racism and sexism or social justice issues, like, no, I'm not going to give a talk for you if you won't let me say these true things that I've experienced. But if it's censorship in the form of maybe don't say these swear words, then that's more acceptable to me. But I haven't had to deal with it yet. Have you? Okay. Any other questions? We have a few more minutes. I'm sorry, Sinclair.
No, what do you mean? Sorry for what? No.
Okay.
I have a couple. I was just waiting to let everyone else ask their question first.
Cool.
Hey,
Does someone else have one though?
I have a question.
Oh yeah, go for it, Malik.
So I know you talked about like touch on disinformation a little bit. Would that technically be like the only competition you have to face, like legitimate competition?
Disinformation?
Yeah, like flat Earth theory stuff and like all that. Like, would that like be the legitimate type of competition? Like the only?
That's a great point to bring up. I don't necessarily consider it competition, although I guess it is. Yeah, I consider it. How do I think of it? This is a really good question because I don't have an answer right off the top of my head. But I think that, yeah, you definitely are competing with things like conspiracy theories and disinformation out there. And the sad truth is that disinformation, especially when disinformation is usually more persuasive because it's usually in the form of what people already believe and what they want to hear. So it's harder to fight it. But we can fight it by being more charming and more persuasive and by having more of us. So if the voices saying the true things are louder than the voices saying the false things, then that's a way we can win. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps.
Okay, great. Sinclair?
Yeah, okay. One question I had was, so you mentioned being guests on shows and on other people's platforms as a way to help you grow yours and learn a lot from those experiences. So did you find that being a guest gave you ideas for what you wanted to do in your own work, or perhaps more importantly, things you didn't want to do?
It definitely gave me ideas of what I didn't want to do. Not always because the other person did something wrong, but just because, I would see someone hosting a show in their own way, and I would realize, oh, this probably doesn't make sense for my for my tone and style and personality. I did get some ideas for what to do, because when you've been on other shows, you see what works, you start to see what audiences react to positively and negatively. And so that can help inform your stuff, your choices.
Yeah, I just think back to all the talks I've seen where I go, yeah, I'm not doing that because that isn't effective at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I've ever been on a show where I just the entire time was thinking, this is horrible. I never want to do what you're doing.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Positive experiences.
Right, because if you're at the point where you're reaching out to someone else to be a guest on their show, you probably have watched or listened to their show before and you probably like it. So don't be a guest on a show that you don't know and that you hate.
Good point. All right, just any other questions? I'll give 2 more minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a question. So I'm not an astro. I'm actually nuclear theory. And
oh, that's dope.
So I see a lot of astro people on Twitter, like young people in grad school or even more advanced undergrads that have a following and try to push for the scicomm aspect of things and also pursue research. And that's kind of a maybe 50-50 or 80-20 commitment that they give to each. Mm-hmm. But I haven't seen anyone in physics do the same. And so I was wondering if you have recommendations of accounts other than your own, obviously, that I can kind of follow and just check them out and see what they're doing and maybe try to emulate some of that in my own social media.
Yeah, the physics girl is great. Diana Cowan.
Oh, yeah. She is, she's been around since 2014. I don't know, she's been around for a while, but yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she's awesome. I don't know of anyone specifically in the physics space.
Astro is also fine. I'm just looking for interesting people to follow. I think okay. Everybody else can also check them out and benefit from it.
Yeah. If you have ideas, definitely put them in the chat because I'm you know, I have choice paralysis right now. Like I can't there are too many options. You know, think people like Serafina Nance, Ashley Walker, like you can follow people who are in the like Black in Physics Week, people who are involved in that. So like Jessica Esquivel comes to mind. She's pretty awesome. Yeah, I'm blanking, but I'd say like follow the relevant hashtags. So follow scicomm, follow like physics specific ones. You can also reach out to me later when I can like put together more of a curated list for you if you'd like.
Well, thank you so much. I think I can also just check your following and see like who you're following.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
I like to think I follow cool people, although I also do follow people that I actually disagree with because I want to keep tabs on them, but you know, that's me. What are my long-term goals in scicomm? I want to host my own TV show. And I want to be like, when there's a big news story in science, I want to be the person who gets interviewed on like news shows. I want to be the person that Rachel Maddow knows as like the astrophysicist.
So let's all thank Moiya one last time for an excellent talk.
Thank you.
Reaction, physical.
Thanks for your questions.
Yeah, if you have any more questions for Moiya, maybe, I don't know, would you be open to them tweeting at you?
Yeah, you can tweet at me or you can email me, goastromo@gmail.com. On Twitter, I'm goastromo. I'm pretty easy to get in touch with.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Moiya.
Yeah, thank you.